Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today is an emotional show. And not emotional the way you feel sad or anything like that. Emotional meaning that I'm going to take you into the life of a young man, football coach, who was born with a particular diagnosis that not only affected his life, but also the people that surround him. And out of that journey, this particular situation shaped and educated those that came in contact with him. And he's still making moves, staying in that beast mindset today, all the way from Geneva, New York, not Geneva, Switzerland, Geneva, New York. I'd like to welcome to the show the one, the only Bobby Greco. What's going on, Bobby?
Hey, Andre, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Great. You know, your story is impactful. We talked a little bit off camera. I followed you on the social media platform. Tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get deep into your story.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was born in Geneva. Everything would seem normal, for my parents in the pregnancy. And then when I was born, obviously they realized, there were definitely some issues. I was born with a condition called arthrogryposis, which is where all my joints were locked in different positions. And a lot of my muscle was replaced with fatty tissues. And from the age of, 0 months old to, still currently I've had I'm up to 30 surgeries. And it's just, it's really impacted everything I do, because even though it's a very physical disability, it's nothing mental, nothing intellectual, anything like that, but it's, I have no use of my arms or legs, so it's still a pretty, it's impacted everything I do for sure.
Bobby, so all of your joints, let me see if I can get some clarification. All of your joints are diffused together.
So they were all locked in, I don't even know how to explain it, just very different positions. So my hips it's called frog leg. If you imagine how a frog looks when he's sitting there with his hips out to the side, right. That's how mine were when I was born. And my elbows are locked to where they can't bend. But I had my right one unlocked, and that's normal now. I can't lift my arm, but it's the arm that I drive my wheelchair with. So I have, little movements at least. But my left hand is still locked. The elbow doesn't bend at all. So, I can use that hand, but really can't use that arm because it, it's a stiff position. So
I've heard of this condition, and I know I actually worked with an individual that had a little bit of that conditioning, but it wasn't throughout his body. It was actually with his elbow, and we was able to. His elbow was like this forever, and we was able to get his elbow to go straight, and now he can move his elbow and stuff. This is a very rare situation. I've never heard of it to the extent at which you have. I can just imagine the discomfort, because when I was working with this individual, I couldn't even imagine him not being able to bend his elbow for as long as he can remember.
Right.
With that said, what were the statistics of how many people that, because I know your parents had to do their research once they was
Oh,
informed
yeah.
of what they had. How rare was this? How many people were actually inflicted with this?
So the number right now is like 1 in 3,000.
Right.
But when I was born, it was much, much more scarce. Like I remember going to a doctor's appointments when I was young, and it would be like the first time meeting the doctor, and they would see my diagnosis, and they'd be like, "Oh, I've never even heard of that." And these are,
Really?
specialists who I'm going to at the time. So it was very rare back then.
It makes you hey Bobby, it makes you question the word specialist now, don't it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. With that being said, all jokes aside, with that being said, if they didn't know about it, they really had no idea how it even occurred. I would take it.
Yeah, no, they have no idea. Like I said, my mom's pregnancy was completely normal. So
Right.
there was no hint of anything until I was born, and everything changed.
You have brothers and sisters, Bobby?
Nope, I'm an only child.
How
They
would
my parents had me, and my mom decided, I think we need to focus our energy here because it was a rough start.
how did it affect your mom and dad now that you're older? You witnessed everything that they had to go through, and more importantly, keeping you uplifted without going into a state of depression when you started to go to school and really socialize with the public.
Right. When I was born, it definitely affected them a lot. They, of course, questioned, was it something they did? How did this happen? We went to all these different doctors trying to figure things out. One doctor even said, because as severe as my diagnosis is, I've actually seen other people who have this who are so much more involved,
Really?
where they can't even talk.
Right.
Yeah. So one doctor thought that was going to be me, and even suggested, because this was, 1989, we were still not in the technology realm we are today.
Right.
So they were kind of like, this might be a case where you need to put him in a home because he's not going to amount to anything, because he's, I'm going to be immobile and unable to talk my whole life. And
I know this may sound crazy, but as you hearing this as a child and growing up, because I'm pretty sure you have repetitive surgeries, in and out
oh
treatments,
yeah,
how do you process your life? And let me clarify something. Because you're disabled doesn't mean that you can't have a quality, a nice quality of life.
absolutely.
When How did you feel knowing that through every turn and every corner in the medical industry, that as your mom and dad in your stronger circle is trying to uplift you, they're constantly giving you the negative. How did you and your family pull together to look at the long-term plan for you?
Yeah, it's going to sound crazy, but my parents were great, and my family was great, and like they never treated me any different. I was a kid, it
Okay.
didn't matter to them what was wrong. So I kind of already had this mindset.
Right.
So I I've had a great like outlook on things with it. And I always joke now that the first 18 years of my life were physically the most difficult because I was, I had to learn how to drive a wheelchair when I was 2. I had to going to school. You had to go through meetings with all the administrators and teachers of what I need, go through all the hoops you got to jump through for everything. And all these surgeries. When I was 8 years old, I had my spine fused. So it was just like physically a very, very difficult time. And yet I joke that was my easiest time because of the support that I had. And, the family who did everything. And, my cousins, I have a ton of cousins and I was never different. I did everything they did. When I got to school, I was very fortunate. I had friends that were the same way.
Really?
I never really experienced being different. And it was amazing. Like I say this all the time. It was almost counterintuitive to me, because then when I kind of got out on my own later in life, that was the moment I was like, oh wow, I really am disabled.
So you never really with the love and emotional support from your family, you never really thought about being the word disabled. It never really crossed your mind because you was able to do pretty much what everybody else was doing to some degree. You can go from point A to point B. May not have gotten there as quick as the next person, but you was able to still have somewhat of a great quality of life even for those 18 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was absolutely amazing. And even like getting into high school, we'll get into how I coached football since the time I was in 8th grade. So, all my best friends were the football team.
Right.
And, there was a night in high school where there was a party at this house. Well, there was like 20 steps to get into this house. I got into that house.
Really?
Yeah. So, all my boys were like, all right, let's do this.
Let's pick him up and get him in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was like things like that I never questioned.
Right.
Yeah, and today looking back, I'm like, wow, that was crazy.
You mentioned football. How did football come into your out of what appears to some people as gloom? You found a passion in school with football. How did that come about?
So since the time I was, 4 years old, probably, I've always been in love with it. I would watch every game. I knew what was going on. It was just, that was my thing.
Hold down, Bobby. I gotta ask this. We might as well just clear the fucking air right now. Your favorite team is who? The Dallas Cowboys, right?
No. Buffalo Bills.
Okay, let me tell you who's coming on the show. Don Beebe is coming on the show.
Really?
Yeah, he'll be on the show, I think, in about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome.
I was a Buffalo Bill fan at one time when they had I love the U. It's all about the U for me. I love Jim Kelly. Love Andre Reed. I just don't understand.
Those are two of my boys.
Yeah, I don't understand how a team with that kind of talent in the AFC could have so many appearances in the Super Bowl and football. To get to the Super Bowl is cool. I understand you want to win, but even the journey to get there as many times as they did, that had to be that had to be shocking for anybody that's a Buffalo Bills fan.
It's amazing how they did that. I mean, especially how you see how difficult it is nowadays. Like,
right.
I know I know that free agency and all that was different back then, but still 4 years in a row. And, the first year being the heartbreak of the wide right and then
Yeah.
losing the second one. You would think after the second one, that's where you falter, and it just never happened. And it's remarkable, and it's something I think people almost take for granted because
Right.
they didn't get that win.
What did you take from that experience as a big fan of the NFL and the Buffalo Bills? How did you channel that into not only what you was, and I'm not even going to use the word disable, but what you was going through and make it into a positive and teach that into football? Because you're coaching football.
Yeah. Yep. So the Super Bowl years, I was so young, and I don't remember like too much of them.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 5 years old, my dad, who's a musician, he is still kind of the one of the house bands for the NFL. So like if they have a party, he would
Right.
go, do the show. And I went one year and I met a lot of those guys like Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and, all that team. And meeting Jim Kelly, he was another person that like, you see what he does now.
Yeah.
He just came, he sat, we talked for so long, and it was like, that really made my love for the sport grow too, because here you see all these guys who, look like superheroes on the TV when you're watching them play a game. And then just to be so down to earth and normal, I was like, man, this is what I want to do. And
Right.
I knew at a young age I couldn't play. And I was like, well, maybe I can coach someday.
Right.
And in 8th grade, my cousin ended up being my aide in school. And I was very fortunate that he had a good relationship with the high school coach. And he asked him one day if it was all right if I, the first year I wasn't really a coach. It was just more of like there, learning,
It was
being
kind of
there,
shadowing, I guess. Shadowing.
yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But then when I got in high school, I started building up more responsibility and doing more. And by the time I was a senior, I ran drills. I did the pregame drills for our offensive and defensive line before games. I did things during the game, and it built me up that way.
If people take you seriously, Bobby, because of your situation, did people take you seriously? Because this was something you were serious about. And did you felt they take you seriously, or did you felt that they was like, oh, we'll just give it to him and he'll get tired and, going about his business?
Right. So like I said, the first year was more of a shadow year. And I think that was my test.
To see if he was going to stick around.
Right. And then once I went to every double day of practice, every game, no matter the weather, I was out there in the rain, I was out there in the snow,
right.
100-degree heat. Everyone saw that, all right, he's one of us,
Okay.
This is what he does.
Okay.
And yeah, so going through the years, it just kind of followed, where they did take me serious. Now, in high school, they were all my friends. So how serious do they take you? You never know. They listened to me at least.
Yeah.
But once I got to college, I continued coaching there at St. John Fisher.
How difficult was it for you to make them know that you're serious? Like, what was the application process like for you? Like, Who did you have to convince that to take a chance on me? Because let's get real. Most people, we're human, so we look here first, and then
Absolutely.
we start to judge, and then start
Yep.
to evaluate. Well, what are the pros and cons of hiring this guy? What is he bringing to the team? When you went through your interview process, what did you tell them you can bring to the team versus what they can do for you?
Yeah. So going into college, I actually was very fortunate because the team that, I coached in high school was so good. We went to back-to-back state championships. We won the second one my senior year. So the college that I went to, the coach was at multiple of our games scouting players.
Okay.
So he already had a little, yes, he had a little knowledge of me because he always saw me, and, I was always doing things. And so he had a little knowledge. So when I did go to my college visit and talk to him, he wasn't like totally skeptical of like, okay, what's this about? He's seen me. He knows that I do know the game some. So he was very cool with it. He was like, yeah, come right on.
What
We'll
was the
see what
one
you can
thing
do.
that you remember in that interview that really stood out that he asked you?
I think he just was, yeah. My college coach, Coach Vosberg at St. John Fisher, he's amazing. I mean, he's been there. He's still coaching there. He's been there for over 30 years. And it was never about the disability, really.
Okay.
His thing was, because of it, though, can I still do football and college? It was always about being able to be the quote unquote student athlete.
Okay.
And that was his focus on, like, he didn't want to see me falter in school just to coach or vice versa.
How did you take that advice?
So at the time I was like, oh, I can absolutely do it, because like I said, the first 18 years, even though things were extremely difficult, it was my easiest 18 years. I consider it. So I was very positive and like, oh, this isn't going to be a problem. And the first year it wasn't. I was at, the same. I was at every practice. I did everything. I started coaching right away. And it was difficult because we went from I don't want to say simple, but a more limited playbook in high school to a very good college team at the D3 level. The year before I went there, they were in the Final Four. So it was a lot to learn, getting down a huge playbook now. So I didn't do a ton of coaching my first year, but I did enough to where I started getting responsibilities the next year. Unfortunately, I got a skin condition in my feet. Don't know how. And I ended up having to miss my first semester of my sophomore year.
How did that affect your overall journey?
It changed everything. It really did. Because I went from my freshman year, I was living in college, and it was, that was very difficult because it was the first time I was away from my home. But I've worked with really great programs that allow me to hire all my aides. So I've never had anyone just random. I've been able to hire my best friends, my cousins, family friends, and it's been really good for me.
How important is it? How is it? That's really neat. How important is that for you to have had that that resource, that you're not relying so much on a hospitalization or a care package plan company to come in and just give you random people who really don't know you. They go to work and they do a job, and there's no sense of attachment or emotion there to know who you are. How much of a game changer was that for you to know that resource was available for you?
Huge. It's absolutely huge because, it moving into college my first year was extremely difficult for me because it was really the first time I was out of my comfort zone.
Right.
None of my boys were with me anymore. I had to, I had made friends instantly because of football again, but they didn't know me like my other guys. So, they weren't like, I couldn't depend on, hey, we're going to this party. You guys want to lift me in the house?
Right.
I didn't have that comfort level. So being able to hire people who I did have that level with was absolutely huge. And
Bobby, what was the name of this organization? Is it still around? Is it still available? Is it a worldwide organization? Is it nationwide, or is it just isolated to New York?
So the first one that I was in that I got AIDS through after high school was through CDR, the Center for Disability Rights. So it's everywhere, and it's a program they have called the CD Pass program, where you just have to go down, fill out some forms, do an orientation, and you're hired. Like, they'll hire you as long as you clear, a background check or whatever else you got to do. So it's been, that one is national.
Okay.
And then I've worked with other programs that are more local, like I'm in a program now called Self-Direction, and the point of it is to get people with disabilities out into the world more, because I'll say, as great as I had it, I'm very rare. I am not a normal case for people with disabilities. I mean, it's really sad to see how, like, a lot of them just have no support.
Right.
So, being able to have people with me who do have that support is absolutely huge.
You mentioned out of your comfort zone. You're not with your boys anymore.
Right.
You're in college. Were there ever moments at that particular point now your feet is messed up, and did you just feel like the world was that you wanted to go back home? How did you come out of that?
It was tough. I went back to college like right away, the semester after. But I had more anxiety, we'll say, because I didn't know what really caused what happened. And it was like, now I couldn't sleep in a bed anymore because my feet were so messed up for, like, it was a good 6 months.
Wow.
And I couldn't lay in a bed. And now, since then, I can't. I can't lay down for that long. So,
did they find out what it was? Eventually, find out what it was that you wound up contracting?
Yeah, they did, but there was no answer for it. It wasn't something like that came on because of a specific reason, I don't think. Yeah, it was kind of a freak thing. And so when I went back to college, I had that anxiety of what's going to happen, So I ended up moving back home and commuting. And that was, I was a lot more comfortable then because I knew if something like that did happen again, it wasn't going to be a big deal. I was back at home.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's a nurse, so she was instantly able to take care of things, help me out there, and that's one of the things I've been so fortunate about is she decided to be a nurse for a living, and then had me. But so I was more comfortable the last couple of years, but the one thing it hurt was I guess social life, because I didn't really go do things after classes. It was like, well, I have somebody working, then they're switching at this time, and I'm just going to go home. I don't want to go out tonight and then have to have my aide drive me home late at night. So it did affect that. And, a couple of years, I got into my senior year and I knew it was done for me after that because I was just physically and mentally exhausted.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really affected me.
How did you wind up coming out of that? I mean, did your family sit down? Did you share what you was going through with your boys, your parents? How did they get you back, get your mind back to what you was really going after, which is the love of football?
Yeah. My last year in college,
Mm-hmm.
I had that one connection from when I was 5 years old, and I ended up linking up with Jim Kelly again, and he was like, "Hey, you want to coach at my football camp?" I was like, "Obviously,
Yeah, like who's going to turn the
yeah,
Hall of Famer down? Like, really?"
right,
Yeah.
right." So I started doing that my last year of college, and after school, I didn't have a permanent job coaching. So it was that kept me in it. It's a week-long camp. So that kept me going. And then I did get a coaching job. So I remained in football through that. But unfortunately, I have to give so much credit to Jim because professionally, he's the only person who's been like, yeah, you can coach for me. I've never gotten that professional coaching job. And I don't mean professional as in NFL. I mean, where it's a paid position, I'm your coach.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been a student athlete or volunteering at a place who, called me and was like, hey, we need a coach for a year. Can you help? So that, I'm eternally thankful for him for that because it really kept my journey in football going.
Do you find that you get, when you're filling out applications on Indeed or trying to network, and it's easy to hear somebody's voice on the phone, but when you tell them what you're going through with the disability and stuff, how often do you find that the conversation begins to be a non-void situation? They're not they're looking at the word disability versus your attributes and what you can physically bring to their organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's weird because I did all right. I didn't, like I said, it was hard getting a coaching position. So I changed. I was like, maybe coaching isn't going to work, and I understood that the disability definitely gets in the way because, like you said, you can talk to me, And with the way technology is now, I'm sending in resumes through a LinkedIn or an Indeed, and I'm emailing coaches and emailing people and trying to get in touch with them, not face to face.
Right.
And that is something that has really gotten in my way, especially in the coaching realm, because you can't see me. So when you're talking to me and I explain, I got this, and this, but I can still do it, you're like, all right, maybe, but you don't know.
Right.
That's why I always, every resume I send, like in my cover letter, it will say I ask for an interview because I know then I can sell myself, but coaching didn't work out. That's okay. I changed. I became a scout. And that was something that I found out I was kind of natural at. And I think it's because of the way I had to coach. I can't do a demonstration for somebody. So I had to really think about it and be able to verbalize it and be able to explain exactly what you need to do because I can't show you. Now, people I've coached with, my family who has seen me coach, would laugh hearing me say that because they always think it's hilarious watching me coach because I'm doing everything in my wheelchair like I'm demonstrating it. So, there's that. But so, yeah, the face-to-face thing it was a really big deal. But when I changed, I did get more opportunity. So scouting, I worked for the Maxwell Football Club for a year. And they are the ones who put on all the college football awards.
Right.
Yeah. So, I scouted for that for a couple years. And it brought me an opportunity to get into another company called Blitzalytics that had just started up. That was a scouting and analytical company. I did a lot of work for them. And then the past 3 years, I've been a writer and scout for the NFL Draft Bible, which is part of Sports Illustrated. So, I've been able to keep it going in some way, kind of a renaissance man, if one avenue doesn't work, you take the other one.
It's amazing sitting here listening to your journey and your story. And I personally want to say thank you so much for coming on and taking the time out of your day to share that and enlighten us that even through adversity and through the eyes of the uneducated, the unwilling, the unresponsive, you was able to still find the right path to be in the same field, sports, football.
Right.
And I was going to ask you, it's funny that you brought up Jim Kelly, and I love Jim Kelly.
Yeah.
It's amazing that this guy would take time out of his busy day, because most celebrities, they get caught up in themselves. But
absolutely,
it was amazing, and I have the greatest respect for him that he didn't pity you, he found a friendship in you. He knew what you was capable of doing, and that had to make you feel really, really good.
It really did, especially at the time it happened, because I definitely questioned a lot at that time because it was, my first year I was still in college, but after that I wasn't. And it was kind of like, I was in limbo of what I was going to do because I don't want to say it didn't end well in college, but I was exhausted by the time that I was done, because it was just like I've gone so hard the last 6 years trying to complete this, or trying to, go through high school, trying to go through college. And it was like, there was just so much of, where is this going to lead me? And to have that, even just for a week in the summer, was amazing. And being able to develop a friendship with him. And honestly, even just being around him and seeing what he does has been amazing. The year he was diagnosed with cancer is something I'll never forget. And it just motivates you when you think about it. He was really sick. And when that week at camp, he was out there throwing the ball around with the kids.
Really?
Yeah. And it was like, wow, of all years, you didn't need to be here. This is the year. And you're out here with the kids. You're throwing the ball around. You're having a good time. And it was like that to me I was like, that's determination. That is not ever quitting, because he was hurting,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would talk to him in between times at that year, and he would just be so tired.
Mm.
But when it was go time, he was out there. And I was like, that's amazing. It was really, truly amazing.
You're before we wrap up, you're doing some remarkable things, and you're really bringing awareness to disabled individuals. Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up today's show.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm actually working on a company I want to start that will help disabled people a lot, with, I say accessories, but it's like, things to help them throughout their day, like padding for a wheelchair, or, something to grab things, to hold, and, a stylus for your phone even.
Right.
And I'm starting that. That's in the very infancy phase. But I do that, and I'm also on a board of the Ontario ARC, which is one of the greatest organizations ever. They help with all services for the disabled. So whether it's a service coordinator, or just someone to help you through processes, or, they have housing for disabled. And they're truly one of the greatest organizations. Just everyone in there is so wonderful. And, now at this point of life, I've been able to actually give back and be on the board, and, see what other people go through to be able to further my mission, because I know I have it pretty good, and I'll give you a good example. For insurance, every year for like the first 20 years of my life, even more actually, at least once a year, they would say, I'm not disabled, and cut me off of my insurance. So it would be like a fight. I'd be like, oh my God, here we go. We'd have to go and prove it and talk to everyone. And it was just such a process. But the whole time, it was with my parents. It was with my aide. I had people there. So it made everything so much easier. And, there'd be times I'd be waiting to go in and talk to the person that I had to talk to. And there'd be other people coming in to do the same thing, who only had the worker from maybe the house they lived in, or an aide that, was just like, the one aide was someone I knew. It wasn't a family member of this person. It was just somebody who worked with them. And they had to go in that room and try to fight for what they needed. And honestly, a lot of disability. Like, I'm fortunate that mine is 100% physical.
Mm.
You know, I have the capacity to know what's happened, to know what needs to be done, to be able to fight, really.
Mm.
But I've seen throughout my life that I'm maybe in the rare 10%, I
Right.
would say. Um, so it's just now that I've maybe run my course, we'll say, in football, this is kind of my mission now.
How can the viewers get in contact with you and support your journey?
You can find any of my social medias. I have Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and it's all LinkedIn too. It's all my name at Bobby Greco. And yeah, that's how you can just follow me along. See, I've always post random things. I find myself funny, so
Bobby, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you support
absolutely.
His journey. It only takes a few minutes to read a post and see what you can do. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.